The slap never landed. It stopped in the air, frozen, because the new maid's hand was holding the billionaire's wife's wrist. Not gently, not politely, firm. Like someone had finally grabbed fear itself and told it enough. Everyone in the grand living room stopped breathing. The crystal chandelier above them still glowed like a crown of diamonds, but the light suddenly felt cold. The polished hardwood floor reflected their faces. Wide eyes, open mouths, hands covering lips. Even the grandfather clock seemed louder than before. Mrs. Victoria Montgomery, the billionaire's wife, stood in the center of the room like a queen who had never been questioned. Her designer gown was expensive, Saint Laurent, custom-made. Her perfume filled the air, Tom Ford, the kind that cost more than most people's rent. Her eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that made grown men look away. Her right hand was raised high, and right below it, trembling on his knees, was Marcus, the elderly groundskeeper who had worked at the Montgomery estate since before some of the staff were even born. His cap had fallen off, his eyes were wet, his shoulders shook like a child's. Mrs. Montgomery's voice cut through the silence. "You want to steal under my roof?" she snapped, loud enough for the entire estate to hear. "After everything you've eaten here, after the paycheck I've given you, you still have the nerve to be a thief?" "I didn't take it," Marcus whispered. His voice was small. "Ma'am, I swear, I didn't." "Shut your mouth," Mrs. Victoria roared. "You think your age will save you? You think tears will wash away your shame?" She turned to the staff lined up by the grand staircase, maids in matching black uniforms with white aprons, drivers standing stiff in their pressed suits, the head chef clutching her kitchen towel, and security guards trying not to blink. "You!" Mrs. Victoria pointed at a young maid. "Bring me the belt from my closet." The maid flinched and rushed away like she'd been struck. Marcus's lips shook. "Ma'am, please." Mrs. Victoria stepped closer. Her shadow fell over him like a storm cloud. "I will teach you a lesson you will never forget," she said, and her hand rose again. That was when the new maid moved. She came out from behind the row of workers, quiet, plain, almost invisible until that moment. Her name was Keisha. She was barely 21, slim, dark-skinned, with natural hair pulled back into a simple bun. Her clothes were not like the others. While everyone wore neat uniforms provided by the estate, Keisha still had on the plain gray dress she'd arrived in, faded, clean, but worn, like something a person would keep because they had nothing else. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing fancy. Yet she walked straight toward Mrs. Victoria like she was walking into sunlight. And before anyone could stop her, before any guard could shout, Keisha reached up and grabbed Mrs. Victoria's wrist. A sharp breath ran through the room like wind. Mrs. Victoria's eyes widened. "What did you just do?" she whispered, like she wasn't sure it was real. Keisha didn't shout. She didn't insult her. She didn't even look angry. She looked calm. "Please," Keisha said, her voice steady but respectful. "Don't hit him." The room nearly collapsed under those words. Don't hit him. Simple words. But no one had ever spoken to Mrs. Victoria Montgomery like that. Not in this house. Not ever. Mrs. Victoria's mouth opened slowly like she was tasting poison. Then her face twisted. "Remove your hand," she hissed. Keisha did not remove it. Instead, Keisha looked down at Marcus. Then she looked back at Mrs. Victoria. "Ma'am," Keisha said, "if he stole something, call the police. Check the cameras. Search him, but don't humiliate him like this." The chef gasped. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia, almost fainted. Her eyes screamed, "Keisha, are you insane?" A driver whispered, "Lord have mercy, this girl is done." But Keisha stood there, still holding that wrist. Mrs. Victoria's voice rose to a dangerous sweetness. "So you're the new maid?" "Yes, ma'am," Keisha replied. "And you're telling me what to do in my house?" "No, ma'am," Keisha said quickly. "I'm asking you to stop." Mrs. Victoria pulled her wrist, trying to yank it free. Keisha held tighter. Not rude, not violent, just unmovable. Mrs. Victoria's eyes turned even darker. "You want to be a hero?" she asked slowly. "In front of everyone?" Keisha's throat moved like she swallowed fear, but she didn't step back. "No, ma'am," she said. I just don't want you to hurt him." That was when Mrs. Victoria smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile people saw right before they got fired. "Do you know what I do to people who embarrass me?" she asked. Keisha hesitated. The other staff were shaking. Mrs. Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice like poison. "I break them," she said. "I break their jobs. I break their pride. I break their future." Then she raised her free hand and snapped her fingers at the security guards. "Hold her!" Two guards stepped forward immediately. Keisha's eyes flashed. She looked around, and for the first time, her calm cracked just a little. Not into fear, into urgency. "Please don't," she said. But the guards were already reaching for her arms. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia, rushed forward, almost crying. "Ma'am, please, she's new. She doesn't understand." "Shut up," Mrs. Victoria shouted. "All of you are fools. That's why you stay beneath me. You want to talk? Talk now. Talk like her." No one spoke. The guards grabbed Keisha's arms. Keisha didn't scream. She didn't struggle like a wild person. She simply looked straight at Mrs. Victoria, and her voice became even quieter, almost like a secret. "If you punish me," Keisha said, "you'll punish the wrong person." Mrs. Victoria blinked. "What did you say?" Keisha lifted her chin. "I said," Keisha repeated, "you'll punish the wrong person." Mrs. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Wrong person?" Keisha turned her head slightly, just enough to look at the tall mirror beside the grand staircase. The mirror reflected everyone, the maids, the guards, Marcus still on his knees, and at the edge of the mirror, a man's reflection. A man standing in the hallway entrance. He was wearing a dark navy suit, Tom Ford, perfectly tailored. His shoulders were broad, his face was hard to read. The billionaire, Mr. Richard Montgomery. No one had noticed him come in, but he was there now, silent as a shadow. The room froze again, even worse than before. Mrs. Victoria's face changed in a blink. Not fear, not surprise. Something else, something like panic, hidden under anger. "Darling," she said quickly, turning, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. "You're home early." Mr. Montgomery didn't answer at first. He stepped forward slowly, like he was walking into a story he did not like. His eyes went to Marcus on his knees, then to the belt someone had dropped on the floor, then to Keisha being held by guards, then to his wife. "What is happening here?" His voice was calm, but heavy, the kind of calm that came before a storm. Mrs. Victoria smiled again. Too fast. "This old man was stealing," she said, "and this girl wants to defend him. She grabbed my hand, in front of everyone." Mr. Montgomery looked at Keisha. Keisha met his eyes. Her lips trembled now, not because she was weak, but because this was the moment she had been waiting for. "Sir," she said softly, "Marcus didn't steal anything." Mrs. Victoria's head snapped toward her. "Keep quiet." But Keisha continued, still looking at the billionaire. "Sir," she said, "I saw what happened." Mr. Montgomery's eyebrows lifted slightly. Mrs. Victoria stepped forward fast. "Are you calling me a liar? In my own house?" Keisha turned to Mrs. Victoria, and for the first time, she did something no staff member had ever dared to do. She looked Mrs. Victoria straight in the eyes, not with hate, with truth. "Ma'am," Keisha said, "the missing diamond bracelet, it didn't fall, it didn't get stolen." Mrs. Victoria's smile faded. The staff held their breath. Keisha's voice remained calm, but her next words landed like thunder. "It was planted." Silence. Deep, thick silence. Mrs. Victoria's eyes went wide for half a second, then narrowed sharply. Mr. Montgomery's face hardened. "Planted?" he repeated. Keisha nodded once. "Yes, sir." Mrs. Victoria laughed, loud and forced. "This is nonsense. You're a new maid. You want to create trouble?" But Keisha didn't back down. "I'm new," Keisha agreed, "but I'm not blind." Mrs. Victoria's voice turned icy. "Who planted it?" Keisha inhaled. The whole estate seemed to lean forward. Keisha's eyes moved from Mrs. Victoria to the corner of the room to the person standing behind the chef, a slim young woman with designer earrings and a tight smile. One of Mrs. Victoria's favorite staff members, her personal assistant in the house, a woman everyone feared almost as much as Mrs. Victoria. Her name was Simone. Simone's smile dropped when she saw Keisha's eyes on her. Keisha raised her chin. "It was her," Keisha said, pointing. Simone's face turned pale. Mrs. Victoria's head whipped toward Simone like lightning. "What?" Simone stammered. "Ma'am, I don't know what she's saying." But Keisha's voice stayed steady. "I saw you," Keisha said. "When you came in earlier, you held the bracelet in your hand. You looked around. Then you slipped it into Marcus's jacket pocket while he was sweeping near the sofa." A sound left someone's mouth, half gasp, half cry. Marcus lifted his head slowly, eyes huge. The guards holding Keisha loosened their grip without realizing. Mr. Montgomery took one slow step forward. His voice was low. "Simone!" Simone's eyes darted around like a trapped animal. Mrs. Victoria's face looked like stone. "Search his pocket," Mr. Montgomery ordered quietly. One guard moved quickly, reached into Marcus's jacket pocket, and pulled out a diamond bracelet that glittered under the chandelier. A bracelet with a large sapphire stone set in platinum. The staff gasped loudly. Marcus began to cry, shaking his head. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Mr. Montgomery stared at the bracelet. Then he stared at Simone. Simone's lips trembled. Mrs. Victoria spoke fast, her voice tight. "This proves nothing. She could have put it there herself." "She's lying." But Mr. Montgomery didn't look at his wife. He looked at Keisha. "Why would she do that?" he asked, calm but dangerous. Keisha opened her mouth to answer. But before she could speak, Simone suddenly screamed, "Mrs. Montgomery told me to do it." The words exploded in the room. Everyone froze. Mrs. Victoria's head snapped toward Simone. Her voice dropped to a whisper that sounded like a knife. "Simone." Simone began to cry. "Ma'am, please." "I didn't want to. You said you wanted an example. You said you were tired of the staff getting too comfortable." Mrs. Victoria's face went blank. Mr. Montgomery's eyes darkened like night. Keisha stood still, her heart pounding, because she knew this was bigger than a bracelet. Much bigger. Because as Simone cried, she added one more sentence. One sentence that made Keisha's stomach twist. "And Mrs. Montgomery said, if Marcus refuses to confess, we'll use the other thing." Mr. Montgomery's voice sharpened. "What other thing?" Simone covered her mouth like she had said too much. Mrs. Victoria stepped forward quickly. "Enough!" she snapped. "Stop talking!" But the billionaire's voice cut through hers like steel. "Victoria," he said softly, "what other thing?" Mrs. Victoria's eyes flashed with fury. Keisha felt the room tipping into something dangerous. Then Mrs. Victoria turned slowly toward Keisha, and she smiled again. This time the smile looked like a warning. "You," Mrs. Victoria said, voice low, "you think you just saved someone?" Keisha's throat tightened. Mrs. Victoria took one step closer. "You have no idea what you just started." And in that moment, Keisha noticed something she hadn't noticed before. Mrs. Victoria's hand was shaking, not from anger, from fear, as if Keisha had touched a secret that was never meant to be touched. Mr. Montgomery stepped between them slightly, but Mrs. Victoria's eyes stayed locked on Keisha, burning. Then she said the quietest, scariest words of the night. "Bring her to my private study. Now." The guards hesitated. Mr. Montgomery's jaw tightened. Keisha's heart slammed in her chest because she suddenly understood something awful. Mrs. Victoria wasn't just angry. She was desperate. And whatever secret Keisha had opened tonight, Mrs. Victoria was ready to do anything to bury it, even if it meant making the new maid disappear. As the guards reached for Keisha again, Mr. Montgomery finally spoke. One sharp command that stopped everyone mid-motion. "Don't touch her." And Mrs. Victoria turned slowly to face her husband, eyes blazing, and asked, "Are you choosing a maid over your own wife?" The room stayed frozen after Mr. Montgomery's words. "Don't touch her." The guard stopped mid-step, hands hovering in the air like they had forgotten what to do next. One of them slowly dropped his grip from Keisha's arm. Another cleared his throat and stepped back. Mrs. Victoria stared at her husband as if she had never seen him before. "Have you lost your mind?" she asked, her voice sharp but shaking underneath. "You're embarrassing me in front of the staff." Mr. Montgomery didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. That made it worse. "I need everyone to step out," he said calmly. "Now." The staff looked at Mrs. Victoria, then back at him. No one moved. "I said now," he repeated. That was all it took. The chef rushed out. The drivers bowed and left. The maids hurried away, pulling each other by the hands. Even the guards stepped back toward the walls. Marcus was helped to his feet and guided toward the staff quarters, still shaking, still crying. Within seconds, the grand living room that once echoed with fear became empty. Empty except for 4 people. Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Victoria, Keisha, and Simone, standing stiff like a statue, tears drying on her face. The double doors closed softly behind the staff. The silence that followed was heavy. Mr. Montgomery turned to Simone first. "You," he said. "Speak carefully." Simone's lips trembled. "Sir, I was only following instructions." Mrs. Victoria laughed suddenly, sharp and loud. "Instructions? From who? Me? Don't be ridiculous." "You said—" Simone started. "I said nothing," Mrs. Victoria snapped. Mr. Montgomery raised a hand. "That's enough," he said. Then he looked at Simone. "Leave!" Simone's head snapped up. "Sir?" "Leave," he repeated. "Go to your quarters. Don't step out unless I call for you." Simone didn't wait for more. She rushed out like someone escaping fire. Now there were 3. Mrs. Victoria turned slowly toward Keisha. "You," she said softly, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You think you're brave?" Keisha swallowed. Mr. Montgomery stepped forward slightly, putting himself between them again. "Keisha," he said, "how long have you been working here?" "Today is my 3rd day, sir," she replied. "And in 3 days," Mrs. Victoria cut in, "you've turned my house upside down." Mr. Montgomery ignored her. "Why did you come here?" he asked Keisha. Keisha hesitated. This was not the question she feared. This was worse. She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. "I needed the job," she said honestly. "My aunt brought me here." Mrs. Victoria scoffed. "Of course, another poor girl looking for a handout." Keisha looked up slowly. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I was looking for work, but not at the cost of my conscience." The word conscience landed like a stone. Mrs. Victoria's smile vanished. Mr. Montgomery studied Keisha's face carefully, like he was trying to read a book he'd never opened before. "You said you saw everything," he said. "Why didn't you speak earlier?" Keisha took a breath. "Because people warned me," she said quietly. "They told me to stay invisible. They told me if I spoke, I would lose my job. Or worse." Mrs. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And yet you spoke?" Keisha nodded. "Because what was happening was wrong." Silence again. Mr. Montgomery turned to his wife. "Victoria," he said slowly, "is this how you run this house?" Mrs. Victoria laughed, folding her arms. "So now you're questioning me? After all these years?" "I'm asking," he replied, "because I'm hearing things tonight that I don't like." She walked toward him, heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "I keep order," she said. "That's what I do. Without discipline, this house would fall apart." "Discipline," he repeated, "or cruelty." Her eyes flashed. "You weren't here. You were busy building your empire in Manhattan. Someone had to control things." Mr. Montgomery's jaw tightened. Keisha watched them, heart pounding. This was not just about a maid anymore. This was something older, deeper. "I never told you to humiliate people," Mr. Montgomery said. Mrs. Victoria's voice dropped. "You never told me not to." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Montgomery turned away from her and looked at Keisha again. "Why defend Marcus?" he asked. "You barely know him." Keisha hesitated, then spoke. "Because he reminds me of my father." Mrs. Victoria froze. Mr. Montgomery turned fully toward Keisha. "Explain." Keisha's voice softened. My father was a groundskeeper, too. He worked for a wealthy family in Connecticut. He was loyal, honest. But one day he was accused of stealing. Mrs. Victoria's fingers tightened around her arm. No one listened to him, Keisha continued. He was beaten, shamed, thrown out. He came home sick, and he never recovered. The room felt colder. That night, Keisha said, eyes shining, I promised myself that if I ever saw something like that again, I would not stay silent. Mrs. Victoria laughed bitterly. So you came here to fight your past? No, Keisha replied calmly. I came here to work, but I won't watch people get destroyed for no reason. Mr. Montgomery exhaled slowly. Mrs. Victoria stepped forward again, this time closer to Keisha. You think you're strong, she said quietly. But this house eats people like you. Mr. Montgomery turned sharply. That's enough, Victoria. She ignored him. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she said to Keisha. You don't know my power. Keisha met her gaze. I know, Keisha said softly. That's why everyone is afraid. Mrs. Victoria raised her hand again, not to slap, but to point. Leave this house, she said. Now. Victoria, Mr. Montgomery snapped. You can't fire her like that. Mrs. Victoria turned on him. Watch me. Keisha's heart dropped. But before fear could take over, Mr. Montgomery spoke. No, he said firmly. She stays. Mrs. Victoria stared at him. What? She stays, he repeated. At least until I understand what's really going on in this house. Mrs. Victoria's laugh was sharp and cold. So you believe her over me? I believe something is wrong, he said, and I won't ignore it. Mrs. Victoria's eyes burned. You're choosing her. I'm choosing truth, he replied. Mrs. Victoria took a slow step back. Then she smiled. Not the angry smile, not the fake one, a dangerous smile. Fine, she said softly. Let her stay. Keisha felt a chill. Mrs. Victoria turned and walked toward the grand staircase, her gown flowing behind her like a shadow. But don't forget, she added without turning back, this house has rules. She paused at the bottom of the stairs and glanced over her shoulder at Keisha. And rules have consequences. She walked upstairs and disappeared into the upper floor. The silence she left behind was heavier than before. Mr. Montgomery turned to Keisha. You should be careful, he said quietly. You've made an enemy. Keisha nodded. I know, sir. He studied her face. But you also showed courage, he added. And courage always has a price. Keisha swallowed. I'm ready to pay it. Mr. Montgomery sighed. Go and rest. Tomorrow we'll talk. Keisha bowed slightly and turned to leave. As she walked down the hallway toward the staff quarters, her legs felt weak, but her heart felt steady. She had survived tonight. But she didn't know one thing. Upstairs, behind a locked door, Mrs. Victoria stood in front of her vanity mirror, breathing hard. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small manila envelope. Inside were old documents, photos, names, secrets. She whispered to herself, voice trembling with rage. That girl has seen too much. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. We have a problem, she said quietly. And this time, we can't scare it away. She looked at her reflection and smiled. Tomorrow, the new maid would learn the real cost of courage. As Keisha lay on her narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling of the small staff quarters room, a soft knock came at her door. 3 slow taps. Before she could answer, a note slid under the door. It held just 4 words. You should leave tonight. Keisha stared at the note for a long time. The words felt heavier than they looked. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the paper from the floor. The handwriting was neat, careful, like someone who didn't want to be noticed. Her heart began to beat faster. Who sent it? She glanced at the door, half expecting someone to be standing there, but the hallway outside was quiet. Too quiet. Keisha slowly stood up from her bed and locked the door. Then she sat back down, holding the note tightly in her hand. She thought of Marcus's shaking knees. She thought of Simone's broken voice. She thought of Mrs. Victoria's smile. Fear crawled up her spine. For the first time since she arrived at the estate, Keisha wondered if she had made a mistake. But just as fear tried to win, another thought pushed back. If I leave now, nothing changes. She folded the note and hid it under her pillow. I won't run, she whispered to herself. Morning came quietly, too quietly. Usually by sunrise, the staff quarters were filled with soft voices, footsteps, and the smell of breakfast. But that morning, the air felt tense. People moved carefully, like they were walking on glass. When Keisha stepped outside, conversation stopped. Maids avoided her eyes. Some looked at her with pity. Others looked at her with fear, as if standing too close to her could bring trouble. Mrs. Patricia, the head housekeeper, pulled Keisha aside near the laundry room. Keisha, she whispered urgently, what you did last night was brave, but bravery doesn't live long in this house. Keisha nodded. Someone told me to leave. Mrs. Patricia's eyes widened. You got a note too? Too? Keisha asked. Mrs. Patricia looked around quickly before speaking. You're not the first, she said. Anyone who ever questioned Mrs. Montgomery got a warning. Some listened. Some didn't. Keisha's chest tightened. What happened to those who didn't? Mrs. Patricia hesitated. Some were fired, she said slowly. Some left suddenly, and some, her voice dropped. Some stories don't have endings. Keisha swallowed hard. Before she could ask more, a sharp voice echoed through the hallway. Keisha! Everyone froze. It was Simone. She stood near the staircase, dressed neatly as always, but her eyes looked tired, nervous. Mrs. Montgomery wants to see you, Simone said. Mrs. Patricia grabbed Keisha's wrist. Don't go alone. I don't have a choice, Keisha replied gently. As Keisha followed Simone upstairs, the walls seemed closer than before. Every step felt like walking into a trap. They reached Mrs. Victoria's private sitting room on the second floor. Simone knocked once and opened the door. Mrs. Victoria was seated on a velvet armchair, sipping tea calmly, like nothing had happened the night before. Her hair was perfect, her face was relaxed. You may leave, Mrs. Victoria told Simone. Simone hesitated, then left, closing the door behind her. Keisha stood alone. Sit, Mrs. Victoria said. Keisha remained standing. Mrs. Victoria smiled. Still pretending to be strong? I'm not pretending, Keisha replied quietly. Mrs. Victoria placed her teacup down. You embarrassed me, she said, in front of my staff, in front of my husband. I spoke the truth, Keisha said. Mrs. Victoria laughed softly. Truth is only useful when it belongs to the powerful. She stood and walked closer. Do you know why I rule this house? Mrs. Victoria asked. Because weakness invites chaos. Keisha lifted her head. Fear invites silence. Mrs. Victoria's smile faded. You think my husband will save you? She asked. He won't always be here. Keisha said nothing. Mrs. Victoria leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. Leave quietly, she whispered. Disappear, and I will forget you ever existed. Keisha felt her heart pound, but she didn't step back. And if I don't? She asked. Mrs. Victoria straightened. Then you will regret it. Keisha took a breath. I won't leave, she said, not while innocent people suffer. For a brief second, Mrs. Victoria looked stunned. Then she smiled again. Very well, she said. Let's see how long you last. Later that day, Mr. Montgomery called for a private meeting in his study. Keisha was shocked when she saw who was present. Mrs. Victoria, Simone, Mrs. Patricia, 2 senior security guards, and Marcus. Marcus looked nervous, but stronger than before. I reviewed the security footage, Mr. Montgomery said calmly, sitting behind his mahogany desk. Mrs. Victoria's face didn't change. The camera near the sofa was turned off, he continued. That's normal, Mrs. Victoria replied. Electrical issues. You know how old this wing is. Mr. Montgomery nodded slowly. But the hallway camera worked, he said, and it showed Simone walking toward Marcus holding the bracelet. Simone gasped. Mrs. Victoria turned sharply. What? Mr. Montgomery looked at his wife. Explain. Mrs. Victoria laughed lightly. You believe a camera over your wife? Mr. Montgomery's eyes hardened. I believe evidence. Simone dropped to her knees. I'm sorry, she cried. Mrs. Montgomery told me to. Enough, Mrs. Victoria shouted. The room went silent. Mr. Montgomery looked deeply disappointed. Simone, he said, you're terminated, effective immediately. Simone burst into tears. Mrs. Victoria stepped forward. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Mr. Montgomery replied, but I'm tired of silence. Mrs. Victoria turned to Keisha, her eyes burning. This is your doing. Keisha met her gaze. No, it's the truths. Mr. Montgomery dismissed everyone except Keisha. As the others left, he turned to her. You should be careful, he said again. Victoria is not someone you challenge lightly. Keisha nodded. I know. But I won't stop, she added. Mr. Montgomery sighed. Sometimes courage needs wisdom, too. That evening, as Keisha returned to her room, something felt wrong. Her door was slightly open. She stepped inside slowly. Her small duffel bag was on the floor. Her clothes were scattered. Someone had searched her room. Her heart raced. Then she saw it. On her bed was the manila envelope Mrs. Victoria had held the night before. Keisha froze. She slowly opened it. Inside were photos, old photos. Her father, standing at a gate wearing the same uniform Marcus wore. Her breath caught. A note fell from the envelope. It read, Your past is closer than you think. Keisha's knees gave way as she sat on the bed. Her hands shook. How did Mrs. Victoria know about her father? And why was she bringing this up now? Before Keisha could think further, footsteps sounded outside her door. Slow, deliberate. Then a voice she recognized whispered from the hallway. You should have left. The doorknob began to turn. As the door creaked open, Keisha realized the truth was no longer chasing her. It had caught up. The door opened fully. Keisha's breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was not Mrs. Victoria. It was Mrs. Patricia. The head housekeeper looked pale, her eyes wide with fear. She stepped inside quickly and shut the door behind her, locking it. Thank God, Keisha whispered. I know, Mrs. Patricia said softly. I saw someone coming down this hallway. I followed quietly. Keisha's knees still felt weak. She held up the manila envelope. She knows about my father, Keisha said. How? Mrs. Patricia's face tightened. Because your father's story is part of this estate, she said. Keisha stared at her. What do you mean? Mrs. Patricia sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, like someone carrying a heavy secret. Your father worked here, she said. Not at this estate, but at the Montgomery summer house in the Hamptons, before this main estate was renovated. Keisha's heart began to pound. He was accused of stealing too, Mrs. Patricia continued. A watch. A very expensive Patek Philippe. Keisha's throat burned. That's what ruined him. Yes, Mrs. Patricia said. But he didn't steal it. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. I know. Mrs. Patricia nodded. The watch was planted, just like the bracelet. Keisha covered her mouth. Mrs. Victoria was younger then, Mrs. Patricia said. Newly married, hungry for control. She wanted to prove she could manage the household staff while Mr. Montgomery was always away on business. Keisha shook her head slowly. And your father, Mrs. Patricia said. He refused to confess, so she made an example of him. Keisha's chest tightened so hard it hurt. He was dismissed in shame, Mrs. Patricia went on. No severance, no apology, and the truth was buried. Keisha's hands clenched into fists. So she recognized my last name, Keisha whispered. That's why she hates me. Mrs. Patricia looked at her sadly. She's afraid of you, Mrs. Patricia said. Keisha laughed bitterly. I'm just a maid. No, Mrs. Patricia said firmly. You're a reminder. They both jumped when footsteps passed outside the door. Mrs. Patricia lowered her voice. Listen carefully. Mrs. Victoria is desperate now. When she feels cornered, she becomes dangerous. Keisha nodded. She warned me. Mrs. Patricia stood up. Then we must be smarter. That evening, the estate buzzed with quiet tension. Mr. Montgomery had not left the property all day. That alone made the staff uneasy. He moved from room to room, asking questions. Simple questions. Honest ones. How long have you worked here? Have you ever been punished unfairly? Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? Some staff cried. Some hesitated. Some spoke in whispers. Fear began to crack. Mrs. Victoria watched from a distance, her smile tight, her eyes sharp. She pulled Simone aside later that evening in the wine cellar. "You're useless," Mrs. Victoria hissed. "You let a girl destroy years of control." Simone trembled. "Ma'am, please. I did everything you asked." Mrs. Victoria leaned closer. "Then you will fix it." "How?" Simone whispered. Mrs. Victoria straightened. "You will give them something bigger to worry about." That night, the power went out. Not in the entire estate, only in the staff quarters. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Keisha sat up in bed, heart racing. Then she smelled smoke. Her door suddenly felt hot. She jumped up and rushed to it. The handle burned her palm. Fire. Someone had set fire to the hallway. "Help!" Someone screamed outside. Keisha grabbed a wet towel and wrapped it around her hand, forcing the door open. Smoke rushed in. Maids were running, crying, coughing. Keisha helped pull one girl up who had fallen. "Go!" Keisha shouted. "Follow the exit signs!" She turned back and froze. At the end of the hallway, through the smoke, she saw a figure standing still, watching. The glow of flames reflected in her eyes. Mrs. Victoria. Keisha's heart dropped. This wasn't an accident. This was a warning. Suddenly, strong arms grabbed Keisha from behind and pulled her back. "Mr. Montgomery." "Are you insane?" he shouted over the chaos. "You could have died!" Fire alarms blared as security guards rushed in with extinguishers. Keisha coughed, eyes burning. "I saw her," Keisha said hoarsely. "She did this." Mr. Montgomery looked toward the smoke-filled hallway. Mrs. Victoria was gone. By morning, the fire was out. The damage was contained to one section, but the message was loud. The staff quarters smelled of smoke and fear. Mr. Montgomery stood in his study, his face dark with anger. "This has gone too far," he said. Mrs. Victoria sat calmly in a leather chair across from him. "You think I would burn my own estate?" she asked lightly. He stared at her. "People could have died." "But they didn't," she replied. "And now everyone is talking about safety protocols, not bracelets." Keisha stood nearby, wrapped in a blanket, listening. Mrs. Victoria turned to her. "You see," she said softly, "accidents happen." Keisha met her gaze. "So does truth," she replied. Mrs. Victoria smiled thinly. That afternoon, Mr. Montgomery received a call. His face changed as he listened. He looked at Keisha. "Someone from the county records office," he said. "They found something." Mrs. Victoria stiffened. "What?" she asked quickly. Mr. Montgomery's eyes locked onto hers. "Records of past staff dismissals," he said, "including a groundskeeper wrongfully accused 15 years ago." Keisha's breath caught. Mr. Montgomery continued slowly, each word heavy. "And a pattern." Mrs. Victoria stood abruptly. "This is nonsense." Mr. Montgomery didn't look away. "The truth is coming out, Victoria." Her hands clenched. "You won't destroy me over a maid," she said. Mr. Montgomery replied quietly, "She's not just a maid anymore." Mrs. Victoria turned sharply toward Keisha, her eyes blazing with rage and fear. "You think you've won," she said, "but you don't know the last thing I'm capable of." That night, as Keisha lay awake, the estate silent again, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "If you want your father's name cleared, come alone." Attached was a location. The old Montgomery summer house in East Hampton. And a time. Tomorrow at noon. Keisha stared at the message, heart pounding, knowing one thing for sure. Whatever waited for her tomorrow would change everything. Keisha did not sleep that night. She sat on her bed, phone in her hand, staring at the message over and over again. If you want your father's name cleared, come alone. Her heart pulled in two directions. If she went, she could finally give her father the justice he never lived to see. If she didn't, the truth might stay buried forever. But she also knew something else. Mrs. Victoria never played fair. At dawn, Keisha stood up, dressed slowly, and took a deep breath. She was going. The location led her to the old Montgomery summer house in East Hampton. The place where the first house once stood, before the main estate became their primary residence. It was quiet. Too quiet. Tall beach grass surrounded the weathered building. The white paint was peeling. Time had eaten away its beauty, leaving only memory behind. Keisha stepped inside carefully through the unlocked front door. "Hello?" she called. Her voice echoed through the empty rooms. Then she heard clapping, slow, mocking. Mrs. Victoria stepped out from the shadows of what used to be the grand salon. She was not dressed in designer clothes today. No jewelry, no perfume. Just a plain black pantsuit. "You came," Mrs. Victoria said. "I knew you would." Keisha's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "You said you would clear my father's name." Mrs. Victoria smiled. "Straight to business. I like that." She walked closer, her footsteps echoing on the old hardwood floors. "Your father was stubborn," Mrs. Victoria said, "just like you. He could have confessed and gone quietly, but he wanted dignity." Keisha's eyes burned. He wanted the truth. Mrs. Victoria's smile faded slightly. "Yes," she admitted, "and truth is dangerous." Keisha clenched her fists. "Why did you do it?" Mrs. Victoria looked away briefly, toward the broken windows overlooking the Atlantic. "I was young," she said. "Power tasted sweet. Fear kept people in line. Your father refused to bow." Keisha swallowed hard. "And now?" Keisha asked. "What do you want now?" Mrs. Victoria turned back to her. "I want silence," she said. "I want you to walk away. I will release a statement clearing your father's name, quietly, posthumously." Keisha's heart skipped. "But?" Keisha asked. "But you leave the estate," Mrs. Victoria continued. "You stop talking. You disappear." Keisha shook her head slowly. "No." Mrs. Victoria's eyes hardened. "Don't be foolish." "I won't trade one truth for another lie," Keisha said. "My father wasn't the only one." Mrs. Victoria laughed sharply. "You think people care?" "They will," Keisha said softly, "when they hear the whole story." Mrs. Victoria stepped closer, her voice cold. "You think my husband will believe everything?" Keisha lifted her phone. "I think he already does." Mrs. Victoria froze. Keisha pressed play. Mr. Montgomery's voice filled the old room, recorded from yesterday. "Victoria, how many people did you ruin to keep control?" There was silence on the recording. Then Mrs. Victoria's own voice. "They were nothing. Staff come and go. Nobody remembers them." Mrs. Victoria's face drained of color. "You recorded me?" she whispered. "Yes," Keisha said. "The quietest voice hears the loudest truths." Footsteps echoed outside. Mr. Montgomery walked in through the front entrance. Behind him were two private investigators he had hired. Mrs. Victoria turned slowly, disbelief written all over her face. "You followed her," she said. "No," Mr. Montgomery replied. "I listened to her." He looked at Keisha. "You weren't alone," he said gently. Mrs. Victoria laughed, broken and sharp. "So this is how it ends?" she asked. Mr. Montgomery's voice was calm but firm. "This is how it begins," he said. "With truth." Mrs. Victoria's shoulders sagged. For the first time, the fear she ruled with turned against her. Days later, the estate felt different, lighter. Marcus returned to work, not as a groundskeeper, but as the estate's property manager with full benefits restored and a formal apology issued. A public statement was released, not hidden, not quiet. Keisha stood beside Mr. Montgomery as he addressed the entire staff in the main hall. "This estate will no longer be ruled by fear," he said. "Respect will replace it." Eyes turned to Keisha, some with gratitude, some with disbelief. Mrs. Victoria was gone. Not shouted out, not dragged away, removed through a quiet legal separation. Her power ended the same way it ruled, quietly. Later that evening, Keisha stood alone in the garden overlooking Long Island Sound. Mr. Montgomery joined her. "You changed this place," he said. Keisha shook her head. "No," she replied. "It was already broken. I just refused to stay silent." He smiled slightly. "You don't have to be a maid anymore," he said. "I'm offering you a position. Staff advocate. Someone who listens." Keisha looked at him. "Good," she said, "because my work isn't finished." Mr. Montgomery raised an eyebrow. Keisha looked at the estate, at the windows where fear once lived. "Some voices are still quiet," she said, "and they need to be heard." The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed, and for the first time in that estate's long history, fear did not follow it. My beautiful people, thank you for watching this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please like this video so more people can learn from it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't miss any of our powerful stories. Before you leave, tell me in the comments, what part of today's story touched you the most? Your comments help the channel grow and bring more stories your way. See you in the next emotional journey.